operating referendum amounts. And I want the board to be able to absorb that information so that they can make sooner rather than later an informed decision on which operating referendum amount is going to be on the 2026 ballot. But again, I want to reiterate, the district is not pursuing a capital referendum for facilities. The district is pursuing what is called an operating referendum, which is for 8 years. If the voters would vote that in place, just to help out with day-to-day expenses. It's not for one-time expenses. Really, what it's going to be focused on is transportation for the district. So, April, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to come and speak as we go around the state and share the, let's call it, joys of Senate Enrolled Act 1. I kind of feel like I'm the, my colleague has assimilated it to being hospice news deliverer. So it's always joyous. I try to smile and deliver the bad news with a smile. So it makes it a little less scary, I guess. But I'm April Fitterling. I am with Policy Analytics, and we do revenue projections for school districts, municipalities, based on a parcel level data for tax levy purposes. I am the former CFO at Warsaw Community Schools before joining Policy Analytics I was with Warsaw for 11 years. So sitting in Jill's role, I understand that this is something that we all need to be aware of as a school district, because it's not just impacting today, tomorrow, it's about 6 years of impact. And I know we're going to have multiple legislation sessions in there, different governor potentially in there, and things could change. But this is as we know of right now. And if we don't take action right now, down the years, we may be seeing that impact on our students, on our schools, and our communities. So I'll let my clicker go to the next slide. So what is Senate Enrolled Act 1? So there's a lot tied up into this. So there's a lot of mechanics. And if I go too fast, please slow me down. I'm happy. I get a little excited because it is a lot of information, but just slow me down and ask me questions. So the first thing with Senate Enrolled Act 1, there are many deductions being created, new deductions, and some deductions being phased out and new ones being phased in. So first one we're going to talk about is the standard homestead deduction is being phased out over the next, let's say, 6 years from 2025, actually starting in 26 to 2031. So that's a 5-year period. So the standard homestead deduction is being phased out and the supplemental deduction is being increased. So essentially by 2031, a home's value will, or the home will only be taxed on 1/3 of its value. So in that time, we have one going down and one going up. So there's a lot of mechanics from 2026 to 2031 with the standard deduction going away, supplemental deduction being phased in higher. Second one is we have different deductions for the 2% tax cap category. So they had certain deductions that were not there that are being implemented over the next 5 years. They are creating changes to other deductions for like over 65 veterans, things like that. So there's smaller deductions being created for homes with those exempt or deductions. The ag base rate calculation is going from 8 to 9%. Let's see. The next is business personal property tax. And I'm going to focus on this a little bit because this is probably one of the larger impacts that we have to districts. So business personal property tax prior to Senate Enrolled Act 1, if you have a business and you have a piece of equipment that was $80,000 or below at purchase price, it became tax exempt. It's not pulled into the net assessed value. It's not taxed. But now it's going to $2 million. So any piece of equipment or furniture or machinery that is $2 million or below is being pulled out of that net assessed value. And we are seeing large impacts for districts like yourselves with that net assessed value being pulled out. So then what does that mean? It drives that net assessed value for the district down and creates potential mechanics with the debt rate and debt levy to be impacted. So I guess I should have made one little caveat is the certified net assessed value just came out for your county and we are still working on the fall report. So we will have exact numbers in a few weeks. Right now we're just talking kind of ranges because this the report we have tonight is based on the 2025 net assessed value. And once we have the updated, it'll be similar because our revenue projections or our net assessed value projections are based on a 2 to 4% growth. And I believe your county was just, or Mississinawa was just over 4% for net assessed value growth. So, so those are the deduction changes that drive down net assessed value. When the deductions go up, it drives the net assessed value down. We'll talk about that in the chart. But there's one other credit that is being created for homesteads, and we're calling it a 10% or max $300 credit, because what it is, it's a credit essentially to homeowners. They'll see on their tax liability. So for just simple math, if my assessed value on my home is $200,000 and my 1% cap is $2,000, this new credit will take my liability to $1,800 because it's a $200 credit. So essentially that is dollars that is credited to the taxpayer, but is not received by the government entities, cities and towns, libraries, and school districts. So essentially that is a newly created unfunded credit or circuit breaker loss. So when we say unfunded credit or circuit breaker, it's the same thing. So that's just unrealized revenue to the district. So there's the deductions being created, driving net assessed value down, and then also an additional circuit breaker loss or unfunded credit, which then also drives down levies or revenues to districts to their operations fund and their debt service fund in this case. So that's a little bit of the mechanics. On the funding piece of the mechanics, if net assessed value drives down, tax rates have been able to historically, the past few years, net assessed values have been trending up. So you'll see the blue line is the net assessed value. The green line is the gross assessed value. So historically, the net assessed value has been climbing, but, and we've been able to maintain our tax rates to generate additional revenue. So as assessed value went up, tax rate stays the same, levies, revenues were able to go up. Well, now as net assessed value is driving down, the tax rates need to increase just to get the exact same amount of revenue or levy. Or if they stay the same, we're going to see less amounts of revenue or levy. And those are
sorry, go ahead and finish that if you want to.
And that's impacting your operations fund. So this is really what it's impacting: operations and debt service. So your property tax revenue funds. Education fund is strictly state revenue based on your student count and the state's projected funding for you.
One thing in regards to gross assessed value, net assessed value, why has it grown? Why is it trending upward? And because we hear all the time from homeowners, hey, my property tax bill is higher this year. My property tax bill is higher this year. Why is that?
It's because our gross assessed value system is based on market value of homes. So as homes grow or the gross assessed value grows, their liability for their tax bill grows along with it. So think of it as gross assessed value is the green line. That's the market value. That's the trend. We have deductions then being created, which then is the net assessed value, the blue line. So similar to your home gross assessed value and its net assessed value, there's deductions that drive that, because you pay your property taxes based on your net assessed value of your home, not the gross, because you get deductions, the standard and the supplemental, over 65. There's multiple different deductions that drive your entire liability down. So that's what it's based on. That is unless they change the assessment structure, the gross assessed value is going to continue to grow and home values will continue to go up. The goal is to slow that, because we've had historic growth the past few years. It's to slow that down a little bit. And as you can see, in 2025, we've kind of created that orange line graph across there to show you the impact on what is potentially going to happen to the net assessed value for the school district. So as these new deductions are being created, that net assessed value is being driven down slightly until about 2031, and then you'll see it start to climb because we essentially have a new deduction floor beginning in 2021. And you'll see on the gross assessed value, there's kind of that dip in 2020 2027, where that business personal property tax is brought down, that gross assessed value. So essentially in 2027, when business personal property tax exemption comes into play, because we're taking everything under $2 million out of that calculation, you'll see that gross assessed value dip down in
So
2027.
April, who's the beneficiaries of this change? Who benefits the most from this change?
Well, I'm going to say the entities receiving the deductions and the credits are the homeowners, the homestead, the 2% categories. The purpose of all of these changes is to drive tax liability down. I think that was their purpose. As we're seeing, maybe the intention is not quite there, because the net assessed value on homes, like I explained, it's still going to continue to grow. So as they're seeing these new credits or deductions, it's based on assessed value continuing to grow. So let's just say in 2025, if I got that $200 credit, if my assessed value goes up in 2026, I'm not going to get a $200 credit. It's going to look a little bit different because my assessed value would be going up. So it's a little tricky in the mechanics of it. And I think the historic property tax relief for homeowners is what their intention was. But as we may look at, that may not be the case in every category.
That's what I was wondering, because it seems like to me the businesses look to be the best beneficiary of this, while homeowners are looking like, okay, I'm getting a tax cut. But when they look at it, it's probably not going to be, when you look at these numbers, you think, oh, I'm going to have a substantial cut,
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen.
Yeah, not quite. I think it's a good way to put it is they may see a differential. It just won't be, they will be paying their liabilities, maybe continuing to trend upward. It just may not be what they would have paid prior to these deductions and credits.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for that question. Next slide. So we talked about the net assessed value being driven down and the deductions that cause that. So what happens to the the school tax rate when that happens? So as you can see, the dotted line on this graph here is what would have happened potentially pre-Senate Rolled Act 1 with the tax rate. So as net assessed values were able to climb, our tax rates, we would have been able to stay the same to generate the same amount of revenue or levy and kept the rates the same. Inflational costs, fuel goes up, utilities go up, everyone wants a salary increase. So these are based out of property tax funds, so your operations fund. And we all know that the operations fund is already tight because we're fitting so many things inside of it. So to manage to a flat tax rate now, you would essentially be losing almost millions of dollars, because you would be managing to a flat rate as your your net assessed value would be driving down, your revenue would be increasing. So as we look at the total property tax rate, as the net assessed value drives down, it drives the property tax rate, overall property tax rate up to generate. In the red line, that would have been just the levy, exactly the exact same amount of revenue in 2025. The tax rate would need to follow that red line up to, in 2031, a max of over $1.73. If we were to follow the rate prior to Senate Rolled Act 1 as the rate, if we would have generated additional revenue from 2025 to 2031, what would that have revenue look like on a 2 to 4% growth? To keep up with that, you'd see the teal line would continue to grow up to over $2.04. So continuing to try to achieve levies that we would have prior to Senate Rolled Act 1. This is just a model of what could potentially happen to the tax rate going forward. And it's essentially just trying to achieve either one, the red line, levies that you had in 2025. That means you're not getting any additional inflational costs or additional revenue, but following the teal line, growing that revenue and levy like it would have prior to Senate Rolled Act 1, 2 to 4% growth, just depending on what the assessed value would have done, you would see what the impact would be to the tax rate there. And this is, again, this is just modeled off of our assumptions, 2 to 4% growth. When we get actual certified assessed values, we will have a better projection of that growth for the district going forward. So next slide, please. So we've talked about the deductions driving net assessed value down. Net assessed values impact the tax rate to generate levies that you would have prior to Senate Rolled Act 1. So now we're zeroing in on your operations fund levy. So operations fund levy, like I said before, it's directly to your operations fund. Your custodians, your utilities, your transportation, your fuel costs are all inside of that operations fund. And this did not translate very well. So currently you're over 2.2 million approximately in 2025 for your operations net levy. But as those deductions become in place, you'll see the dotted line is what your operations net levy would have done prior to Senate Rolled Act 1. It follows the maximum levy growth quotient at about 4% growth. That is what is in the statute right now. And that's what we would have modeled in that dotted red line. So as the deductions are becoming in place and that business personal property tax exemption comes in place in 2027, and then we also have another thing that's going to impact your district. It's called the PTRC elimination. So if you've heard of the LIT, local income tax, there's two pieces to it. Local income tax as a whole is going away for every district or every county in the state. Some districts received certified shares, which is direct revenue from their county. Mississinawa did not see that, so that's not going away. But what is going away is property tax relief credit. And what that does is it's a credit to your homeowners right on their property tax bill. So they just get a credit right away. It's the county gives that to your homeowners, and they see that credit on their tax bill. Well, if your homeowners are at their tax cap already, they won't see a difference. But who will see a difference is the school district, because it creates additional circuit breaker loss. Circuit breaker loss is revenue not received by the district. So you'll see in 2028, when we have that PTRC being eliminated, it's projected that the operations levy could be right around 1.4 million. So going from 2025 at roughly 2.2 million in operations levy, and trending downwards to 2028 to just over 1.4 million. It's a differential of about 1.1, almost 1.2 million in what you would have received in 2028 prior to Senate Rolled Act 1 to post Senate Rolled Act 1. So this is probably the biggest thing we want to highlight is that loss in revenue when we know that our expenditures are just going to continue to climb. Like he mentioned, transportation. That's probably one of every district's biggest costs, besides custodial and maintenance on their buildings or capital projects to just keep their buildings operational. I'm not sure. Do you guys have a pool at all?
Thank God, no.
Thank God, no. Yes, I agree. I'm thinking, okay, I should have asked that before I got up here, because that's one of the biggest is like, I've worked at a district and we had a pool and it was just a money pit. We'll just call it that. But we know that buildings were built in 50s, 60s,
Yep.
and prior. They're not operationally efficient. There's always something going wrong. You've got to update your equipment to keep it updated. And so the cost to do that just continues to climb. So operational costs in anything, as you know, as a homeowner, do you guys have NIPSCO here or, okay. So NIPSCO customers obviously are going to be seeing a growth. So when we're talking operational losses of 1.1 to 1.2 million, just in direct revenue to your operations fund, that's when we need to say, okay, one, can the school district sustain that dip down before it starts to climb up? But as you see at the climb, by 2031, you're not even projected to be where you're at in 2025. So how is that loss to be made up? I know that schools talk about operational cuts and creating efficiency and doing all that they can to operate as efficient as possible, but I'm not sure, cutting 1.2 million and then continuing to have a loss and not even be where you're at 2025 is something that can be done.
Yeah, April, I want to add one thing on this, and just for people in the audience, people watching at home, they see for our operations fund, we're generating currently 2.2 million. That's not to say that it costs 2.2 million to operate our facilities. That actually costs us $5.3 million per year for our operations fund just to operate. Busing alone is $1.2 million per year without purchasing busing. That's just day-to-day running of buses. How we get that additional currently about 3.1 million is we have to transfer that 3.1 million from our education fund over to our operations fund. We already transfer the maximum amount, which is 15% that we're allowed. We can't transfer any more than 15%. We have no other internal way of creating additional revenue into the operations fund without looking at an operating referendum. So it's either operating referendum or significant, and we can't even call it staffing cuts at this point in time because I don't have that much staffing in the operations fund to cut. We have to look at program cutting, which is transportation at this point in time. So that's one thing I really wanted to note there for the operations fund is, yeah, we generate 2.2 million, but it doesn't even come close to generating, it doesn't even generate half of what we actually need to operate.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, so we'll keep this on track. Next slide. So we have been partnered with the district to not only deliver the property tax revenue projections and reports for the district, but also take a look at the cash flows and cash balances, because it's one thing to talk about revenue coming in and what that looks like, but unless you're looking at your cash flow and looking at that impact on your cash balance, the revenue is just numbers out here. But when you plug it into your cash flow and say, okay, what exactly is going to happen? Can take your revenue, take your expenditures. What does that ending cash balance look like? And can we sustain? Because you see that dip and that slight climb. Is that something we can sustain? Well, looking at these numbers here, so we updated this slide. We are maxing out that 15% transfer from education to operations. We are taking that property tax levy in. You'll see that local taxes on the receipts dip down in 2027, 2028, 2029. The business personal property tax, the PTRC, creating additional circuit breaker loss. And you can see that surplus deficit line. That's kind of where our focus is when we're looking at these with school districts. When we're just focusing in on the operations fund itself, you can see that deficit continues to decline year after year, and it's not sustainable based on our cash flow projections. So when we look at that revenue alone, okay, you're like, okay, it dips down but comes back up. But is that something we can sustain compared to our expenditures? And our models do have, a 2 to 5% growth in operational expenditures, inflational costs, which is realistic. So you'll see that in the projections. But looking at this slide, as a former CFO, as a board member, as superintendent, what I would focus in is that surplus deficit line and look at what's going to continue to grow year after year unless something is done like an operating referendum. So I won't spend too much time on this slide. It's something you can dive into. Just wanted to show that deficit that would continue to grow for the district.
There is one additional thing I want to note in regards to going back to the transfer from ed fund to ops fund. We had a lot of community output saying that we need to take less out of district students, because we're 35% of our students are out of district. We did that. We cut our out of district transfers by 103 students this year. That's an impact. I mean, the out of district students in total enrollment was down 162. So that 162 total students right there is about $250,000 less revenue that we can transfer from the ed fund to the ops fund. So when we don't take those out of district students, that has an impact to the educational programming that we offer, but it also has an impact to our day-to-day operations as well.
Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so we talked about Senate Rolled Act 1 and the impact to the district. So what can be done to offset those potential loss or those potential deficits for the district? So we have partnered with the district to put a couple of scenarios to say, what does it look like? What does a referendum look like? Tax rate, tax levy, where do we begin? What does it look like? So we have modeled, and referendums have changed because they changed the language in the question. So with the mechanics of Senate Rolled Act 1, driving down net assessed value, you essentially have to work backwards and say, okay, what rate do we need to generate the levy that we need over the 8 years? Because we have some districts right now. We have one district that advertised in 2025 and they went out and they were approved. And they're like, okay, we only need 1.2 million because we know our assessed and 1.2 million and X rate. And we have been staying at that and we'll be fine because we know net assessed values have trended up and we'll be able to generate the revenue we need over the next 8 years. Well, now the district is going, oh no, the mechanics have changed. Net assessed value for our district is going to be driving down. We are essentially going to be seeing less revenue than we projected for our referenda, and we're not generating enough revenue to sustain the programming that we told our community that we were going to be able to do with this referendum. So with the knowledge that net assessed value is going to be trending down over the next 5-6 years, what does that look like to an operating referendum? So as you'll see, we have started working backwards and saying, okay, what is the maximum rate that we would need to advertise to get a potential levy? And we have modeled that in 3 different levy amounts and 3 different rate amounts. So to get the 1.2 million in revenue, what's the max rate we would need to advertise? $29.44 for $1.2 million. And then 36.80 would be the max rate for a 1.5 million referendum. And then 49.07 for a $2 million referendum. So we've modeled that kind of in this chart to say, okay, when the net assessed value is driving down, what's the max rate we need to still get that base amount of 1.2, 1.5, and 2 million? And as you can see in 2031, that's when the net assessed value is at its lowest. And so that's where we would need to advertise at least that, to get that 2 million, we would need to advertise that 49.07. So as you can see, we've kind of modeled it where you'll see where in the beginning years, you may be generating more revenue than needed. Or you could advertise that to say, we need a max of $2 million. Maybe in the first 2 years, we're only going to take $2 million and not the max levy as advertised. Or we could capture that max levy and then sustain over the next few years till it dips down to that 2 million and then programming goes up. So there's a couple, this is just your first visual at what could potentially happen with the referendum, what the rates and the levies would look like. There's still a lot of mechanics because we need to, establish the need with the district once the certified net assessed values for 2026 are released. And we'll spend a lot more time doing a lot of different runs and looking at what that need is after that is released. So that's the first visual. Next slide. So when we talk referendum, obviously we want to say, what does this look like for the taxpayer? And so we have put together for the referendum impact of the median homestead taxpayer. The median value for this slide is $128,000. And so what does that look like? Just the referendum impact to the taxpayer. This is not their overall tax liability. It's just what would be the referendum impact. So as we're talking 2026, it would be your running year. And so then that would start in 2026, their tax liability in December. I gotta think, if it's ran in November, the tax liability in December for those property taxes, you would see that first would be the referendum impact they would see. In 2026 is when those new deductions are in place. So we will eventually look at this for the district, what the overall impact would be once we have that complete assessed value from 2026. So if you look at their overall impact with new deductions being created in 2026, they may not necessarily see their taxes go up because of those deductions. So we are just narrowing out just the referendum impact for you tonight, to just give you a visual of what that would look like for the taxpayer, depending on the different levy amounts. Any questions on that slide before I go to
Just clarification, those money amounts are for the year, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, not just their one
Yeah.
spring or fall or
Yes,
spring or fall.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
that would be the
So
overall
it'd
for the
be-
year.
If it was spring, fall, just divide it by 2,
Yep.
and that's what. tax-
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So let's go next slide. So we talked about median. So let's talk about the 25th percentile, and then we'll talk about the 75th percentile. And sorry, I'm going blind. So every time it's new, I'm like, okay, let me see what this looks like. So no, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy. So the 25th percentile. So let's look at this homestead is $100,900. Thank you. I talk too fast and stumble on myself at times, but if we're looking at the 25th percentile, thank you. This homeowner, this would be the impact for starting in 2026. Obviously, this is the least of the impact. So, obviously the lower the levy amount, the lower the direct impact. But like I said, we will give you the overall impact once we have those certified net assessed values. This is just an impact on potentially the 25th percentile for this homestead. And then flipping to the next slide, giving you a visual of referendum impact on the 75th percentile. So this is a home with 168,425 for their assessed value. And looking at the impact, and you'll see the impact from 2025 all the way to 2034 on each of these. This is, like I said, this is just the referendum impact, just to give you a visual of what the homeowner would potentially be paying on each of those different levy amounts. So I know I went over the taxpayer impact pretty quickly because those are just assumptions where we are now to give you kind of a ballpark range. They're not set in stone because that assessed value and the mechanics of the assessed value will change that taxpayer impact. And something we will bring back as we start talking further down the line with the referendum, what would the potential overall liability look like for the homeowner as their deductions are being created and the overall impact of the traditional tax rate with the referendum tax rate applied on top of that. So again, the mechanics for the deduction changes for Senate Enrolled Act 1, there's a lot of mechanics, and it's over the next 5 to 6 years until we have a new base. And if we're talking referendum, 5 to 6 years is a majority of an 8-year referendum. So you want to make sure if you're going out and asking, we want to make sure that you're getting the right information to ask for the correct amount because of these changes over time and what the most difficult thing is we are looking at what we know right now. And we know that there may be changes to the LIT, the PTRC, there may be changes to that, but we can't plan on that. We've got to plan with what we know now. And if they make changes, then that's something the board could adjust as you go along. So if you were to go and run your referendum at, let's just say, just pick any one of those rates, but they change the mechanics of that PTRC loss and the district didn't see as much and the need wasn't as high, then you could say, okay, we're only going to take this amount instead of this amount. So there's some movement in there, but I think we just want to be prepared that we advertise high enough for the need as we go along, because as we see those net assessed values drive down, and our revenues are being driven down, we want to make sure you are prepared for the long run over the next 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, the way the referendum question's worded and how we have to present to the community is highest, best, worst case scenario from the district. The board has full authority to reduce that referendum amount as they see fit on a year by year basis. So, but the way we have to advertise is for the worst case scenario. So if there would happen to be potential changes with the short legislative session coming up this year, I'm not optimistic. I will say that. So, but if there would happen to be some that would benefit school districts, then we would have that opportunity to adjust that. Fast forward to a long legislative session, the budget session, year and a half away from now. If there was major changes to it, again, we can do the same thing. We can adjust that operating referendum, what we collect at that point in time as we see fit. So we can adjust it lower to benefit the community, just to generate the revenue that we need to generate in order to continue to function and serve the best interests of our students.
I have one more question on this, April. So this is based on the gross assessed evaluation. So if that goes up, does that money amount then come down?
The potential,
So in other words, we're looking at on this 168, the last one you gave us 168.45, and the max is 369 that we have figured here. If the evaluation, if our assessed evaluation goes up, does that money amount then come down? Does it change, I guess?
well,
That's what I'm asking.
this would be based on their home assessed value.
Right.
So if their home assessed value were to come down, then yes, their liability would come down.
Okay. But if it goes up,
If it goes up, then if it goes up more than the conservative growth that we have done in the modeling, maybe 2 to
Okay.
4%,
Uh-huh.
then it could be a little bit higher.
okay.
And you know, just the reminder on referendums, they've changed it to every other year, so only the even years. 2026 is probably going to be a historic year because there's a lot of districts like yours going through these difficult decisions to say we are seeing a loss in our operations levy, or reduction in our levy, or even a maintaining in our levy when our expenditures are increasing. So it's going to be a big year for referendums, and we will be here with the district to run more scenarios and walk you through the process.
Thank you. Thanks, April. Appreciate it. You guys have any other comments or questions or anything from the board?
I've used up my allotted.
Phone a friend. Okay, we still have about 5 minutes. We do want to be able to take a break from 6:15 to 6:30-ish before we start our regular board meeting. We'll open it up to the audience at this time. If you guys have questions for us or for any of the board members, feel free to offer them. April, you're good. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, April.
Feel free if you have any sort of input or anything at this time. Yes. If you want to go up to the mic, that'd be good. That way everybody can hear you. Appreciate it.
Does all this mean that you're not going after new buildings and everything?
Correct. So the capital referendum, capital is tied to construction. So that's new buildings, new facilities. So a capital referendum lasts for 20 years, and that's for new buildings, facilities. Operating referendum lasts for 8 years, and that's just for day-to-day expenses. Utility, buses, transportation, can go for teacher salaries. Our big need is to be able to, we need it because of the cuts with Senate Enrolled Act 1 to be able to maintain transportation for our students. So, thank you.
That cut back on new construction.
Correct. There is we decided over the summer that there's not going to be a capital referendum or construction project going on. So we're looking, the operating referendum is purely for day-to-day expenses. So it does not go to facilities in terms of new facilities. It can be used for some facility maintenance like roofing, asphalt, that type of stuff. But again, the main purpose of this operating referendum over the next 8 years is to be able to maintain transportation for students. So capital referendum is completely off the table at this time. What we would have to spend doing, if this would pass, this operating referendum in the fall of 26, the thought process is now let's spend from 26 to 29 to look at our enrollment trends, the needs of our district. This doesn't make the needs of RJ Basket go away. It doesn't. I mean, so we're going to have to continue to evaluate and what's the best option there. Continue to just look and find creative solutions for that facility and for our students. So, but at the time being, it's hit the pause button. This operating referendum and the impacts of Senate Enrolled Act 1 take precedence over any and everything, just for the livelihood of the district and what's best for our students going forward. Yep. Nope. Any others? Spike, you look like you have something to say, man.
This is not a new problem, right, Jill? We go through this about the last 10 years.
That's right.
And when we talked about it, I said, we need to get them up, because no matter what we would do, this money's needed. It's how we pay for a lot of different things. And I think sometimes you think, well, somebody said, well, how aren't you get so bad? Well, it got bad because we couldn't afford to fix it, correct? Am I not? And
Yep.
So people brought that up, and all we got to do was putting bad money, good money after bad money in a building that's just not going to make it. But no matter what we do in the future, as far as, building new buildings, we got to do this to operate. And we do a great thing here. These guys do a great thing because people want to come here. They can go anywhere they want to, but they want to come here. And he told you a lot of money they get, but it's not enough to offset. When we reduce students, we reduce money that goes for teacher salaries and other things. And so, but this is not a new problem. And Jill would say, they're cutting this again. We used to have 5, right? 5 different programs.
Mhm.
Now we're down to 3. They lump all that together. Parking lots, roof, things like that. So go home, tell your people. Nobody's trying to pull wool over your eyes. If we don't do something like this, we're not going to be a school corporation one of these days. That's exactly where we're at.
Yeah,
Remember all,
there was
Jeremy?
a time we collected money at the gross net AV.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we brought it down once, and then now they're taking it down some more with circuit breaker.
Been a
So
long, but Jill, I told her one thing. I sent her one thing. I should have paid more attention to what she had to say, because she was saying, we're losing money. So that's all I got. Thanks.
And I'll add some just additional details in terms of the facility side, which is separate from the operating. We did authorize the $28.5 million bond back in the spring, summer, this 2025. That's all old debt that's been paid off. It doesn't increase the liability on the local taxpayers. It's just, hey, we paid that off. We can reauthorize and issue that debt out again. That $28.5 million, that's all the money that we have for 20 years in terms of bonding expense. So we've issued 12.2. Is that right? 12.2. We issued 12.2 of that 28.5. So that leaves us 16.3 million essentially after we do those projects. And that 12.2, it's going to our elementary roofs. It's going to parking lot expansion at Northview, because traffic is just an absolute nightmare over there. HVAC, some cafeteria remodeling at Westview. High school tennis courts have Grand Canyon sized craters in them. So we're doing new tennis courts at the high school. But we're sitting on basically that remaining 16 million moving forward, just to try to figure out what we're going to do long term with RJB. I can't take 16 million and put it into RJB and make it a new building. That would be the worst thing to do with taxpayer money. Now, I will tell you this, because we are not going for the capital referendum. We are going to have to, there's going to be some work that we're going to have to do at RJB, but it's going to be Band-Aids. Hey, we're going to have to look at the roof. We're going to have to look at some of the HVAC and mechanical, and it kills me to have to do that. And I really don't want to have to do that, but we're going to have to do that to get us by over the next 4 years, so we can look at alternative plans for the district on what we're going to do with our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders long-term going forward. So we're trying to be very thorough and strategic with how we prioritize things going forward. But that's just kind of where we're at this point in time. But the main thing for us to focus on as an administration and school board and community is we have to pass this operating referendum. It's not debatable. I mean, we have to pass it in order to function. Otherwise, district's going to be in tough shape. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So, wish I had better news, but that's the reality.
Here, I got one more thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, we started doing the board did a lot of things most of our debt service has been 10 years or less, trying to get things down to prepare for this. But then, like I said, the state started working the other way. So we were trying to get ready to be able to build. We don't, how much do you know how much we've got left as far as debt service? You have to be paid 2027 goes off.
Yeah,
right?
2027 until the GO bonds were issued.
Right.
Yes.
So they've done their due diligence to get the things done, to be able to be there, but nobody's on our side right now, I guess. Thanks. I promise I won't say
Thanks.
anymore.
So just want to reiterate, there'll be tons of information coming out. We're going to have a lot more information moving forward. Once we get a decision from the board, I'm going to be out and about in the community. We'll be hosting coffee chats, just be able to sit down one-on-one. If you have local organizations or anything you want me to come talk to, or if you want me to come to your house and talk one-on-one, come to the office and talk with me one-on-one. We just want to get the information out there and get it out there as accurately as possible for folks. And we're always willing to answer questions. So that's all we got. We'll take a little break, and thank you, everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it.
We're fucking.